Don't you just love it when people basically tell you you have to make a corset before you can make any kind of costume to go over it, and then they go on to tell you that corsets are really difficult to make and you need experience and all of that, and you think, guess I'm not making a costume then? What if I told you it's not that difficult? Hello and welcome, my name is Daphne and I'm so happy you're here. Today we're going to make a corset because I do think that corsets are a very necessary foundation for any costume, especially when you're talking big ball counts and that kind of thing, which is kind of what I do. And yes, corsets aren't easy, but they're not that difficult. Really the most difficult part about making a corset is getting the fit right. I wish I could help you with that, but I'm not a professional and I don't want to give any wrong advice out there. But a good pattern is a really great base that you're going to need. For my corset patterns, I always go to Red Threaded. They have amazing patterns. I'm not sponsored or anything. I have 17 subscribers. They have no idea that I exist. I just really like their products. If you don't have the money for their patterns, there was this company called Arena Black Corsets, I believe. I will correct myself if I'm wrong, but they have free corset patterns online and they look really good. I just personally never use them, so I can't tell you from experience how good they are. They just look good. And from then on, you're just going to make mock-up and mock-ups and mock-ups until you get the fit right. It's a lot of playing around, but you don't need a lot of experience to get that right, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, my first corset doesn't fit as nicely as my last corset, but that's fine. It's a learning curve, you know? My first dress didn't fit as nicely as my last one. That's fine, but don't let it stop you, okay? So, for today we're going to focus on making a corset. I already have the pattern, I adjusted it. It looks a little bit funky, I'm not going to lie, but I'm pretty sure it's right. The corset's going to be for my sister, and I haven't made a corset for her in a while, so that's probably why it looks funky to me. I'm just not used to seeing her body on paper, basically. The first step is going to be cutting out your fabric. What anyone is going to advise you, and what I'm going to advise you to, is to draw on the actual pattern lines that you're going to stitch over instead of the seam allowance attached to it. However, I'm not going to do that because I'm a little bit lazy. Do as I say, not as I do. The thing is with corsets, precision is kind of important, but I found that just when using the seam allowance as my stitching guide, everything works out fine. I do have notches and I do match them up, but otherwise, do it the proper way or do it the not proper way. You're probably going to be fine. It's fine. Now for seam allowance, it kind of depends on what you're going to want to do with your boning channels. For this corset, the seam allowance is going to be used to make the boning channels. So I'm working with a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters. If you want to be a little bit on the safe side, you can go for 2 centimeters. However, there are other ways you can make your boning channels. There are external boning channels, where you make the boning channels and put them on top of the seams. In that case, you're fine with a seam allowance of about 1 centimeter because you're going to have to trim it short anyway. You can also make a double layered corset. I prefer to do that for stage because there just goes a lot of boning in that. And in that case, your seam allowance can be between 1 and 2 centimeters, depending on if you like the safety of that extra seam allowance. However, for corsets, you're going to want to use very sturdy fabrics, and those don't fray as easily as other fabrics. So I personally find that a big seam allowance is only going to add bulk. But do whatever makes you feel comfortable and trust your corset. Now back to those fabrics. I'm using a coutil. That's what's usually recommended for making corsets. I love it. It's great to work with. It's really sturdy. It's also a little bit pricey. If that's not something that's in your budget, or you're making your first corset and you don't want to pump a whole lot of money in that, that's totally understandable. You can also use a twill canvas or something like that. I've made corsets out of canvas and that worked fine too. But I'm going to use coutil. I would recommend it. It is a little bit expensive by the meter, but for a Victorian corset like this, you generally only need half a meter. So take that into consideration. finished cutting out all the pieces, which is quite frankly my least favorite part of any sewing project, so I'm glad that's done. What I'm going to do next is iron that, which yes, I should have done before, we don't talk about it. For most of these I'm just going to put an iron on it, just like you would expect, except for these back pieces. As you can see, I've drawn them double. I'm going to iron these on the fold. So this part of the corset is technically going to be double layered. That's just because I want to give the eyelets in the back all the support they can get. Plus, quite frankly, it's easier when you have the back panels double layered because there's a lot of boning going in there. So that's why I make these double layered. Once I've ironed it, I'm going to sew the pieces together. I'm going to do that in pairs of 2 just to make everything easier to handle. I'm going to leave those back panels for last, I think. Not entirely sure. We'll see how things work out. But this should be fairly easy. I'm not going to paste anything. You should. I'm not going to. Honestly, it takes a long time and I don't mind taking my time with things. But with pasting couture, I never feel like it really matters. It doesn't really shift. So a couple of pins in there should be just fine. I am going to match up those marks I made. That is really important. I'm going to sew everything wrong sides together so that the seam allowance is going to be on the outside of the corset. That's just because I think that's prettier with how I'm going to do the boning channels. How you want to do that exactly is entirely up to you. How you want to do your boning channels, what kind of boning channels you're going to do. If you're doing external boning channels, you're also going to want to have your seam allowance on the outside. But with seam allowances made into boning channels, it's kind of up to you. Let's get some sewing done. This is going surprisingly quickly. I'm getting a little bit suspicious. I'm not complaining. This is for a costume that has to be done in a month, so we don't talk about it. Okay, we don't talk about it. I'm going to iron. So I did a little bit of an oopsie. It's not too bad. I had happily sewn the back panels to the rest of the corset, which is not what you're supposed to do. At least not the way I want to do things. I will explain later on why, but just trust me, if you're doing things the way I'm doing them, don't attach those back panels yet. I had even started, I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, you can tell. I had even started sewing in those boning channels in the back, and I realized just in time that I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I'm genius. So the next step is going to be pressing these seam allowances open, and then we're going to make boning channels out of these. This is my center front seam. That one is going to have 2 boning channels on either side. All the other seams are just going to have 1 boning channel on one side, turned towards the back. That's literally only just because I personally think it's a little bit of an overkill to have 2 boning channels on either side of each seam. I like the extra support on center front because that's where you're going to bend over, but otherwise, personally, I don't think it's that necessary. Of course you can, there's nothing wrong with that if you like the extra support, or if you're using tie wraps as boning, valid, but they're going to be less strong than what's actually supposed to be used as boning. So in that case, you might want to have 2 boning channels on each seam. What we're essentially just going to do is flat fell all of these seams. I hope I can explain it to you a little better with visual aid. I'm gonna try. Okay, I'm going to try my very best to explain this. So what we're first going to do is cut down the seam allowances that we don't need. And since I want to fold all of this to the back to form the boning channels, I don't need the seam allowances that are towards the back. So I'm going to trim those all down, with the exception of the center front, because both of these seam allowances are going to be bone encasing. Once I've done that, I will fold over that front seam allowances towards the back and fold the raw edges under until I get a bone encasing of about 1 centimeter. That's what I found I need for my bones. For my boning. Yes, for my bones. My bones require 1 centimeter. It's a bit of a hassle. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably going to stick 12,000 pins in this, and there are easier way to do this, like with external boning channels. I don't want to do that because external boning channels add a bit of bulk. Now, it's not a lot, it's honestly fine, but why do that when you can do this and eliminate a tiny bit of bulk? Again, external boning channels are fine. I just chose to make things a little bit more hard on myself because I like to try a new method. I already made a corset using this method and it didn't work out great. I did like the result, it just wasn't as neat as I wanted it to be because it was my first time doing it. And I'm a perfectionist, so I'm going to try to get this perfect, maybe? I'm already not going to get it perfect because I used the wrong side as my right side. So yeah, I'm going to cut down the seam allowances. Fold, iron. I'm going to ignore the back for now. Again, we will get back on that, trust me. We're just taking this step by step. Good morning, it is the next day. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm really hoping I can finish this corset today. If not the details, that's fine, I can do all of that on the couch in the evenings while watching a movie or something. I'd like to get all the structural parts done, and I think that should be doable, but I do have an appointment with the hairdresser this afternoon, and I really don't like getting my hair cut. So my body might decide to stop working after an hour or so. I'm also going to ask for bangs, which I wanted bangs for so long, but I'm so scared. This is completely irrelevant. I might have bangs in the future if I don't chicken out. Anyway, this is what I got done yesterday. That's upside down. There we go. I managed to iron all the boning channels. I pinned them down with a gazillion pins, so this is now a hazard. Those are ready to be stitched down, but first we have to do the waist tape. If you don't know what a waist tape is, it's a piece of twill tape that you put at the waist, and that's just going to be some reinforcement for the seams. I've also found, personally, that it helps distribute the pressure on your waist a bit. I don't know if that's officially true, it's just what I found to be true. So do with that what you will. I'll show you in a second just how we're going to do that. But the waist tape is the reason that we haven't attached those back panels yet. Trust me, it will all make sense. Maybe don't trust me. I think it will all make sense. Alright, we have the back of the corset here, and you can kind of see where the corset wants to lay flat around the waist. That's where we're going to put the waist tape. So I have my twill tape. Now, remember, there are no back panels attached yet, so I'm going to cut this just a bit longer than I think it needs to be. This stuff isn't that expensive. I'm fine with wasting a bit. And then I'm going to pin it to the back, and it will be sewn down when I'm sewing down the boning channels. The back is a little bit more difficult, but we'll get to that later. Alright, the boning channels are in. They're not nearly as nice as I had hoped they'd be. But, oh well. 1.5 centimeter seam allowance is definitely a little bit on the risky side. Maybe I should have gone for 2, but oh well. Now we're going to attach the bags. And with that, we're also going to bring this waist tape to the front. This is going to be one seam. This we're going to leave out. We're going to cut that short, and that's going to be hidden under the boning channel, that raw edge. That way, the waist tape can go on the inside of this piece and be anchored, preferably in all of these stitch lines. There's going to be another one here, but on this one it's going to be anchored in one stitch line. This one will be done properly though. So here you can see what I was just talking about. I've treated these seam allowances exactly the same as I treated the others. This is that back piece that's going to flip over like this, over this under seam allowance. Apparently I need to turn this a bit, but that's okay. I'm going to stitch those boning channels on here. That's going to secure the waist tape. And then I'm going to fold this over and treat this just like I did the others. One of the things I keep in mind when I decide how I'm going to make a corset is what I'm going to do with the edges of the waist tape, because I want them secured and I don't want any raw edges hanging around. And that's sometimes kind of difficult because sometimes there's just nowhere to put them and you have to accept the fact that there are now raw edges living in your corset. And sure, there are things you can do about that. I usually just whip stitch over it. That's fine. I have a corset where I did that and that's holding up fine because it is secured in a lot of places in the corset itself. So usually it's fine. But the reason that I really like this method of corset making is that you have the edges of your waist tape just completely tucked away, safe, anchored really, really securely. It's great. So yeah, this is not going to be applicable for every method out there, but I hope maybe some of you will find this useful and give you some ideas of how to handle the waist tape. It's really a nightmare sometimes. Maybe I'll add some B-roll of that corset with the raw edges on the inside because, oof, it looks kind of rough. To be fair, with that one, I kind of forgot I had to add a waist tape until I was almost done with the corset, so that did not help. Anyway, irrelevant, I'm going to sew some boning channels. So I did stop functioning yesterday, which is not entirely unsurprising, but look! I have tiny bangs! They're baby bangs because I'm scared of getting more extreme bangs, and also my hair probably doesn't work for it. That's entirely unrelated to this entire video, but in case you wanted to know. So all of the boning channels are in, the waist tape is nice and secured, and I already put the binding on the bottom. I prefer to do one side of the binding before putting in the boning, just because I like to get as much done as I can before putting in the boning, because this is more manageable before putting in the boning. If you like to keep things step by step, then by all means you can put on all the binding after you put in the boning. That's totally fine. If you do put on the binding first on one side, don't do both sides. I would advise starting with the side that's a little bit more difficult. For most corsets, that's going to be the top, because you have this bust line here. For stays, that's usually going to be the bottom because you have those steps there. I was going to do the top, but then I started sewing and halfway through I realized I was doing the bottom. I will show you how to do that in a sec, but first I'm going to put in all the boning in this. I'm using synthetic whalebone. That's what I prefer. It's lightweight, it's a little bit flexible but very sturdy, very comfortable. It will shape to your body through heat and steam, so that's amazing. For these back panels I will put in flat steel boning. That's just because I want to give these eyelets as much support as possible. I have in the past done whalebone in here and it works, but it can buckle a little bit around the waist because that's where all the tension is, and you can get it flat, but steel just doesn't buckle, so I will just save you the headache of that. So I'm going to put in boning. It's not too difficult, but it is a bit of a lengthy process. Boning is in, bias tape is in. Yeah, I'm tired, but that's okay. I am determined to finish this today and it's almost finished. So the one thing that really needs to be done is the eyelets. I'm gonna use this thingy for that. I don't know what it's called. You can put things in it and then you can use the things. I mainly use it for pressing eyelets, but you can use it for a bunch of things. It's really handy. It's saved my life, to be honest, because I used to hate setting eyelets. And this came along. It's great. I don't have to use a hammer anymore. I know there are people who find that therapeutic, and I get that, but that's not me. So that's the main thing that needs to happen. What I'm also going to do, probably, is flossing. Flossing is something they did on historical corsets. It's this bit of embroidery at the top and the bottom of each boning channel, and that's just going to give a little bit more support to the boning. It's going to prevent it from wearing through the fabric. And also if your boning doesn't quite fit in the boning casing, then that's also going to help prevent the boning from shifting. Personally, I use it mostly as a decorative detail, and arguably I don't have time for decorative details, but I really like a good flossing and I really like some hand sewing, so I might just do it anyway. We'll see. That's definitely going to be couch work, which is fine. I am so ready to just sit on the couch. But after that, she'll be finished. Making corsets, it really isn't that hard, but I am stressing and overworking myself, and that makes it harder. This could have been a 2-day project. It's going to be a 3-day project, and that's fine. So let's get those eyelets in. It has been well over a month since I made this corset. However, I was happily editing this video and then I realized I never filmed an outro. So here we are. Either way, she's finished. And maybe it's actually good that I've had a little bit of time, because I remember back when I just finished this, I wasn't super happy with it, just because I'm a perfectionist and this isn't perfect. But she's finished, she's been worn, and she fits, which is at the end of the day the most important thing. She fits, she can support the skirts and everything that went on top of this, and that's what a corset is supposed to do. Iris chose this neon green lacing to go in the back. It's not what I would have chosen, but you know, that's the fun with corsets. No one is going to see them, so if you want to make a bright yellow corset with purple flossing and green lacing, you can. No one will know. I hope this video was useful to you. I know it wasn't exactly a tutorial, and to be honest, I never meant it to be one, because there are tons of tutorials for corsets online. You can find one, and it's all going to depend on exactly what kind of corset you want to make. What I do hope though is that this video serves as a little bit of inspiration and courage for you to go and make your own corset. Because making corsets seems really daunting when you dive into it first, but I think you can do it. Like I said before, the most difficult part is getting the fit right. And you can do that through making however many mock-ups you feel like you need to make. What I would recommend though is if you have your final mock-up and you think, yeah, this one fits right, go and wear it for an hour or so. Because sometimes it seems like something fits, but then you go and actually move around and sit and have it be on your body for a bit longer and it might not fit as well as you thought it was going to. While we're on that topic, corsets are meant to be comfortable. Sure, if you've never worn one, then maybe at first it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's never meant to hurt. If your corset is hurting you, or if that discomfort does not go away, then your corset doesn't fit right. And that's one thing you can eliminate a little bit with wearing that mock-up for a little while longer, because something that feels maybe a little bit uncomfortable now can hurt in an hour, and that means it's just a patterning mistake and it's not something you have to get used to. And yeah, maybe you think it's going to be fine and you make your corset and you wear it for a day and then you realize, oh no, this didn't fit me at all. And you know what? You can make a new one. You can make however many corsets you need to make. Practice makes perfect and all of that. Just don't let this stop you from making the thing you want to make that needed a corset. Or just make a corset for funsies. Who needs a ball gown to go over top of it? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This video is a little bit late. My schedule is up in the air right now. I really have to figure out what works for me and my body. But you can subscribe and get a notification whenever I upload next. I do have the footage shot for the next video. It's going to be a very chaotic sewing vlog. I have about 9 hours of raw footage, so it's going to be a journey. I do try to post more regularly on my Instagram. I'll post the finished pictures of cosplays over there. So if you want to see what I've made, it's there. You can follow me there. And I post progress pictures and all of that in the stories. So maybe I'll see you there. And I hope I'll see you next time. Bye! My camera has been crooked this entire time. I hope you didn't notice.